karibuni sana. It's really a pleasure and a delight to have all of you here today present. And we hope more and more people are going to join us. So today we are going to have a great conversation, as you are all aware, around the matters of food systems. We are going to have a very candid dialogue on how to make our food system better. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to this session. My name is David Osogo. I work at the African Population and Health Research Center, and it's my pleasure to be hosting this event today. I'll not be doing this alone, ladies and gentlemen. I have my co-host, a lady who doesn't need any sort of introduction, so I'll give it a try. Prof is quite a jovial person. She's been keeping us upbeat as we're waiting for everyone else to join. There are a few things that maybe I need to remind you, because you already know that Prof is an alumni of Washington State University and also University of Nairobi. She is indeed the very first nutrition professor in Kenya. She's the founder of Rural Outreach Africa. In 2017, Professor won the African Food Prize. Prof has been a member of parliament in 2003 to 2007, among many accolades. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not worthy of introducing Professor Ruth. Prof. Ruth Onyango is going to be my co-host today. At this point, I would like to invite Prof to say hello to all of us and give us some opening remarks. Prof. Onyango, welcome.
Thank you, David. I should carry you around as my introducer wherever I go. This is very interesting. I'm imitating you, and you have already extracted what is relevant. And I don't like long introductions, because I've been around for a long time, and my CV is like books, many books, yeah. But I just want to welcome everybody. I want to welcome everybody to this, and also to recognize you, David, for agreeing to virtually manage us through this whole process. I told Jerry I don't have to call anything with David because I have nothing to prove. But I really, your name has come up, and people have just said you are just the right person to do this. So please just feel free to do it. I'll just come in when I want people to smile and laugh. And, being a grandmother, I've seen it all. But I just want to tell everyone we value you. We've had this great opportunity, with the BMZ support and connecting with the friends from India, Malawi, Burkina Faso, yes, and ourselves, just talking on right to food. What was interesting for me is just that when we had the constitution making process, I was part of it. The 2010 constitution, which we started in 2005, I was part of it. I was in the parliament, and I made sure that this section 43(1)(c), right to food, was actually in the constitution. And so it's been there. But, it's being violated all the time because we didn't take time to even internalize what it meant. Nobody stayed there to unpack it. And each time we have had food issues and we are running around doing the same things we have been doing before, looking for donations, and Kenyans coming together, let us help. And then they say, oh, we need policies, and imagine what? We actually have those policies. If any country has good policies on food issues, on nutrition, it moved from food policy to food and nutrition policy. We even revised it many times. It is there already. We have institutions working on these issues. We are very vulnerable as a country, especially also as part of the Greater Horn of Africa, to droughts, but at the same time to floods after droughts. And then this time we had locusts, fall armyworm, we have conflicts. So we are always vulnerable, but we always say, oh, where are the policies, And it's as if we don't have policies, but we have them. So we were very blessed to have WHH come and look us up, started in the field where we were working, And then, the 2019, the whole process started. This will be done in one county, Vihiga. In 1 year's time, Jerry was there, Aura, our M&E person were there, and we really had no idea it will come through, So 2020 comes March, and here is the corona. Shall we go ahead? We are not sure, but I really want to thank WHH, and we want to thank also those who have been supporting us, the Civil Society Academy, out of India. And it is an international program, and it's giving us an opportunity as Kenya, and using a county of Vihiga, where the governor is so supportive to actually try to actualize and bring into action this right to food and pack it. So what does it mean? So we're all learning as we go along. But then also this year in September, as you are aware, the Food Systems Summit is coming up. And I've been involved in a number of webinars myself, just trying to unpack what it means. And also on my part, being quite skeptical, because I've seen this and I've written about this and I've tried to internalize what all this means, all these international conferences. But maybe coming in the middle of a corona a pandemic is a good thing, because it's just aspirational. What comes out is aspirational. What comes out as consensus or declarations, because since 1974, with the first food conference, I did a graph. I should have shown it to you, and also showing the world population and the percentage of the vulnerable and the hungry. Very little has changed. Pledges are made, money comes, and I wonder how much is spent on these conferences. And we don't seem to make a dent on the vulnerable and on the poor. And in one meeting, I just told them, look here, we just have to do things differently. If the corona does not change us, then nothing ever will. We have been sitting down for the last 18 months. We have reflected. We see people suffering. We have the always vulnerable. We know them. We say women of reproductive age, children under 5, the landless, the displaced, the refugees. We call them with disability. We know them, but we have newly vulnerable people who have lost their source of livelihood, people who have lost their daily wages. So those who have been pushed to the brink are so many more. And so when the UN talked about coming up with the Food System Summit, I've seen about it. And so what is different? What is different is that we need it to be sustainable, first of all. It has to be sustainable. We have to make sure we look at human health, our animal health, and our ecosystems, nature, Mother Nature. As we sit down, we have seen Mother Nature is angry. We have seen volcanoes, just coming out of nowhere, lava going, killing people. We have seen earthquakes. We have seen even here in Kenya, ground in Rift Valley being submerged in water. We have just seen, even though the skies don't have so many aeroplanes, something is just not right. So if we are going to survive in this world, we have to worry about Mother Nature. So actually that's two-pronged. Secondly, the UN also wants to make sure that everybody this time is on the table. It's nothing like we don't like so-and-so, we can leave out so-and-so. Everybody, private sector, public sector, NGOs, individuals, academics, business, women, men, everybody, indigenous peoples. If you look at who is going to be involved, everybody. You wonder whether we shall have a consensus, but I've been saying maybe we shall have consensuses, different types. And then what really needs to be done, as far as I'm concerned, is what we do on the ground with all those declarations, with all those pledges. And I'm hoping that more resources can now go to the ground to support those who actually are in direct contact with the ground. That's where things need to happen. We need policies which connect to programs, not just sitting in isolation. We need to get out of our cocoons, always we are just sort of in the compartments and, the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing. And so we want ourselves here as we convene to just begin to see what we can discuss going forward, what we can discuss, and after that, what we can do together here, and, just see how we can address the issues of food security, issues of nutrition security, issues of water, issues of, environment, issues of sustainability, issues of those who are vulnerable. How do we address them? Issues of even bringing the private sector, whom we like to, call names and all kinds, and we don't like them, but bring them to the table. Let them also be accountable. Issues of governance, issues of corruption, issues of mishandling of resources. You've seen even here in Kenya that the funds that have been lost through corruption, through KEMSA, through people just taking, really being just so unholy, doing things like that, could have improved our schools to a level that could equalize so much, could have improved our healthcare systems. But, governance is so key at all levels. And so at the end of the day, it is like each one of us has a responsibility. Each one of us. No blame game, no passing the buck, each one of us. And that at the end of the day, as humanity, we all live each other. I told this group I was with last night that the number of the hungry, the number of the malnourished, the number of poor has really shot up. And you cannot talk of an equitable world or talk of saving the world in terms of nature when people are so hungry, so vulnerable that they are just looking to survive. They just want to survive. They're not worrying about how that tree will look. How can we save this nature, these animals? They are just trying to survive. And so we are all in this if we want to save the world and save ourselves at the same time. So I just leave it there and just say you are all welcome. It's a journey. It's not ending now. It's a process. And especially for you young people, you are the ones to really see how you can save this world. Some of us will be looking down from heaven or up from the grave. So welcome to the meeting, and please just make sure you participate. You put your points on in the chat. They'll be taken up, and we are hoping that even as we go forward, you will stay with us as we're on this journey. Yeah, I just want to thank my team and Jerry, who is our head of everything. I throw her into the river, into the sea. I said, Jerry, take this on and move on with it. I'm very good at doing that, by the way. That's how I pass the baton. And then all of you that have been identified, David especially, they sang praises of you, that you should be able to do this. And also to thank our own county that we're working in Vihiga, and the governor, has been extremely supportive. And I think all of us can actually succeed. And anyone attending, just let's stay connected. Put your contact in the chat, so we can all get to know each other better and we move forward. I've been at this for a long time, and I'm telling you, I tell people I can't retire when I still see a child who is hungry. It's difficult for me. Yeah. Thank you so much, and enjoy the forum, the meeting today.
Thank you so much, Professor Onyango. Very, very encouraging words, and who would have done this better than Prof herself? Thanks, Prof. We pray for good health upon you, and that you're going to be around long enough to see some of us you're inspiring, bring forth the change that you've been dreaming all along. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Prof has captured this really well. Today we are talking about accountability for the right to adequate food in Kenya, looking at pathways to sustainability, inclusive, resilient, and equitable food system. So we are going to approach this conversation in a number of ways. First of all, we're going to have a panel discussion. I'm about to introduce the panel that we have today. As we do the panel discussions, feel free to also interact at the chat box. My colleagues would be on standby to address some of the some of the issues that will be coming up, and also the panel will have some minutes to address some of the concerns that will be coming from the chat. My colleagues led by Njeri are on top of that. We'll also get a chance to get into breakout rooms to now delve deep into the issues and have a more and deep and detailed conversation around these matters. After that, we'll be able to come back together in a plenary and just conclude the discussions together. Ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, allow me to introduce the panel that we have today. I'll begin with Professor Jill Guy. Prof, if you could just come on to the screen. Prof, I would like to say hello, but before that, ladies and gentlemen, for those who might be meeting Prof for the first time, which is very unlikely, Professor Jill is a professor of law. She's done a lot of work around law and human rights issues. She's taught in several universities in the UK, in Nigeria, in Hong Kong, and just around the world, I should say. Prof has had a chance to act as the advisor on constitutional making process in several countries. And she's also involved a lot with the constitutional making process in Kenya, together with her spouse, Professor Yashpal Gai. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to Professor Jill. Prof, just say hello.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon if you're somewhere rather further east.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So Prof. Jill is going to be on the panel. The second panelist I'd like to bring to you is Dr. Elizabeth Kimani Morage. Dr. Kimani is my boss at FHRC. She is a public health and nutrition specialist, currently a senior research scientist at FHRC, and also the lead of the Maternal and Child Wellbeing Unit at the center. She's a Wellcome Trust International Engagement Fellow. She has a passion on matters human rights, and specifically the right to adequate food. Dr. Kimani is also an adjunct faculty at Brown University in the US. Just like Professor Ruth and Professor Jill, Dr. Kimani also has a very, very, very long CV that I can't get to the very bottom. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Dr. Elizabeth Kimani. Please say hi.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you so much and welcome. The next panelist I would like to introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, is Sylvia Kuria. Sylvia Kuria is a farmer, an organic farmer with vast experience, over 10 years of experience in this field of organic farming. Sylvia is also an ambassador of iForum. Sylvia will get a chance to maybe give us some light on that. I also gather that Sylvia runs Sylvia Baskets Enterprise. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Madam Sylvia Kuria.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, and welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Next panelist I'd like to introduce is Dr. Martin Oulu. Doctor, if you're around, come onto the screen. Dr. Oulu is also very, very experienced in these matters. He is a consultant, a researcher, a teacher, and also a policy analyst. His interest is in the area of the nexus between environment and development. Dr. is keen on matters climate change, biodiversity, renewable energy, and just issues around this area. And he's done a lot of work to inform policy and action around Dr. Oulu also works both as a technical person and at policy level. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Martin Oulu.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. It's good to have you around. The other panelist I'd like to introduce to you is Alice Kemunto. Alice, could you kindly come onto our screen? Alice is the Executive Director of Consumer Grassroots Association of Kenya. So Alice is basically representing all of us consumers today. Very, very key component of the food system. Alice is an alumni of African Nazarene University, and she fights for consumer rights protection and advocacy. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Alice Kemunto.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You can see I don't have a long CV like the rest, but I'm also a professor of consumer advocacy, professor in quotes.
Thank you so much and welcome, Alice. The next panelist that I would like to present to you is also quite guarded like Alice. People who don't put a lot of their information online, so I really struggle to get lots of details. I'd like to introduce you to Edgar Okoth. Edgar is my colleague within the team that has been putting forth this session. Edgar works with SUN CSA. He is actually the national coordinator. Edgar is a guarded human being. Edgar, please, salimia watu. Edgar? Edgar, you're muted.
Technological issues. Yeah, so thank you so much for the introduction. I am Edgar Okoth. Currently, I coordinate the SUN CSA. SUN CSA is scaling up nutrition civil society alliance, and we mobilize different civil society towards championing and also holding the government accountable in regards to nutrition. And I'm glad to be part of this rich panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Edgar. Na karibu sana. The last panelist, ladies and gentlemen, that I'd like to present to you has already been introduced. This is Professor Ruth Onyango. Prof is also going to be on that panel. And I would also like to present the apologies of the Honorable Esther Passaris, who was also supposed to be part of this panel. She got some commitment and she sent her apologies. So kindly receive her apologies. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to now move into the panel discussions. I invite all of us to, draw our pens and papers very, very close, take notes, because this is going to be a very candid discussion. And this discussion is just going to set pace and base for the conversation that we are going to have in depth now into the groups later on. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite the panelists to be ready now. We are starting. And just as a reminder that today we are talking about accountability for the right to adequate food in Kenya, looking at the pathways to sustainability, inclusivity, resilience, and equity within our food system. So within this panel discussion, I'd like to ask the panelists to, in the interest of time, try and stick to allocated time. So for each and every question that is going to be shot your way, you have 2.5 minutes to respond. We'll also have follow-up discussions after that. And then towards the end, we'll have an opportunity to interact with the questions that are coming from the chat. I'd like to ask my colleague Jerry to keep track of some of the key questions coming from the chat that requires the attention of the panelists. So towards the very end, I'll give you some time to help us raise those questions. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin the panel discussion. And to kick off this conversation, I'd like to speak to Professor Jill Guy. Professor Guy, as we talk about the right to adequate food, and in her introduction, Professor Onyango alluded to the presence and the provision of this right within our constitution. And I know you have interacted with that and the entire process of making our constitution. Talking about realizing the right to adequate food in Kenya, Professor Jill Guy, where are we and how do we progress from here? Prof?
Well, thank you very much. By the way, David, how long do you want me to speak for at this point? This is just the 2.5 minutes now in response to your question. Is that right?
Yes, I can give you 3, Prof.
Okay, fine, thank you. Then where are we now? Well, first of all, of course, we have the provision in the Constitution, which Professor Ruth mentioned, which actually goes back to the very first draft of a Constitution from the CKRC in 2002. And I just want to say a couple of things about that. First of all, just think about, in a sense, the revolutionary nature of a provision in a constitution that says every person, not just every Kenyan, every person has the right to be free from hunger and to have adequate food of acceptable quality. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people would have thought this was pretty extraordinary, I think. There is more detail that I might find myself having to go into, but let me just try to explain very briefly what difference it makes that something is a right. Because of course, politicians deal with issues of food all the time, especially if they're in a country that has any issue with food, but it's basic. But to have a right means that it's more than just something politicians can give to us. In fact, the Constitution says that rights are something we have because we are human. They are not given to us by government. Politicians like to give us things, like us to feel they're indebted to them. And they, as far as they're concerned, food is a matter that they put in their manifestos and possibly put in their policies, and maybe something happens. But they would really like us to think that it's they who give it to us. But in the case of a right, it is we have a claim on them and they have a duty. They are not doing us a favor. They are not giving us charity. In my first thesis as a postgraduate student, I quoted something that stuck with me for the last 55 years. Charity honors the giver, but humiliates the recipient. A right, it is not the same as charity. Now, to keep things short, I just want to say a word or two about how far we have got. And as a lawyer, I suppose I tend to focus on issues of what's gone to court. Of course, it doesn't only affect what goes to court. We have human rights commissions, which have do some discussion of the right to food, especially the National Commission on Human Rights. As far as court cases are concerned, it's a little disappointing. It's better than under the old constitution. The old constitution just said there was a right to life, and the court said that means nothing, not even the right to food, just life. Government kills you, it was a violation. But if it allowed you to starve, nothing in the constitution affected that. Our new constitution at least says something. We have had a handful of cases where the right to food has been brought up, but usually not a case which is all about the right to food. It is usually about something else, and the right to food is just one aspect of it. There's one of the big Ogiek case, they included a claim on the right to food, for example. And in a case of eviction of small traders in Ngong, they said, what you're doing when you evict us from where we're doing our business is denying us the right to food. But you can see there's only one aspect. We have had no cases which fully explore the range of issues that can be used in a right to food case. I think we can do it, but to use this right effectively in the courts is something that requires a long-term plan. Committed organizations. There is an organization in India which came to life precisely because there was a case in 2001 on the right to food, and it gave rise to a thing called the Right to Food campaign. And the case went on and on and on, as Indian court cases tend to, until it reached some sort of settlement. In the meantime, the court had got from the case had got from the Supreme Court a whole series of orders to the government as to what they were supposed to do. But very often, one interesting thing is those orders were actually to do the things the government had actually already committed itself to. And that makes it much more manageable. Otherwise, I think people get so scared of the full range of what is a right to food. How can the law deal with it? Aren't we expecting the impossible? And the answer is no, because you can look at it in terms of what I think we'll come on to these things, but it's been defined quite clearly. What is a right to food? A right to what? It's not a right to caviar, but it's more than a right not to starve to death. And what is it government is supposed to do? And the first thing government is supposed to do is to respect, that is not to interfere with our right to food. In other words, it is our primary responsibility to feed ourselves and our families, as it is, that's what being a human being is in society is about. But there are more obligations on government, and it's those further obligations which we have yet to explore in any court cases. I'll stop there because I'm happy to come back to it later. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much, Professor Jill. That's a good introduction, a good foundation for that. I would like to speak to Dr. Kimani, just from where Prof has left that. Even as we talk about our right to food, we are aware that food has lately been commodified. What is your view of this in light of the fact that we are trying to advocate and move towards achieving universal access to food? Dr. Kimani.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. for this topic. Really, it's a very interesting topic for me, very important topic for me. And I really like to talk about the right to food. And it's a good beginning to start talking about how do we actualize the right to food and thinking about universal food access, which we'll talk about later. But for now, I'm talking about commodification of food. Maybe just so that I remind people what for those who may not be sure of what we mean by commodification. When you talk about a commodity, you're talking about something that has market value or value on a market. So the primary objective of that product or whatever it is the market value. And so what we are saying by commodification of food is that we have lost the value of food as food to feed people first. And we have now embraced the value of food as a commodity. And this has resulted from the ethos of capitalism. There's something called the Green Revolution that happened in the 1950s. And this really resulted to this commodification of food. There was a lot of industrialization of food, a lot of introduction of agrochemicals, a lot of introduction of fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, and all this just to really increase the yield of food. And we have seen this has remained even today, to today, where a lot of chemicals are being used in our food system just to increase the yield. And that's what we are talking about commodification, having like almost the primary goal of producing food to make it a commodity, something that has value in the market for profit purposes. And we have forgotten really, or we are kind of forgetting the primary objective of producing food first to feed the people. And so when we talk about commodification, and then when we talk about decommodification, and when we talk about recommodification, we are dealing with this issue. So we want to decommodify food, so that food, we return food to where it belongs. Food as a basic human need. Everyone needs to eat. Everyone, despite whether they have money or they don't have money, everyone needs to eat. But if food is just a commodity, then it means that you eat when you have money. If you don't have money, you don't eat. And this whole concept of commodification is influential thinkers about commodification, not necessarily about food commodification, but commodification include people like Karl Marx and Karl Polanyi, who brought this whole idea of commodification. And when we think about food, then we are thinking about how is our food being commodified and what can we do. So, so we have this whole commodification issue has resulted in many evils, and one of them is erosion of the natural foundations of food production, and that include erosion of our soil, erosion of our water, and also erosion of biodiversity. And it has resulted into erosion of also our social values. I say, and I give example of myself when I was growing up. Of course, I grew up when already this whole thing of food commodification had started. The Green Revolution was already there. It's not like I grew up in the past before that. But I want to say maybe in our village, this had not really reached there a lot. And we grew food for we did subsistence farming. And the primary reason why we grew food was first to feed the family. We grew to feed the family, and we shared food within our community. We did not necessarily sell food if our neighbors did not have food to eat. But today, when I look at what's happening, food has been so commodified that people think about the food, the food as a commodity first, and really even food sharing has reduced, is not a common practice that is happening right now. And it is said that many farmers who produce food to feed the world are themselves hungry because they cannot afford the commodity that they have produced. And this has resulted in many people not being able to access food. So the issue of access to food is really limited. So we want to return food to where it belongs. We want to return food to be a basic human need and understood as so, and a basic human right that everyone should access. So this is, I know my time is up, I guess. So I think I'll stop there with regards to commodification.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kimani. Dr. Kimani, I told you in the beginning, is so passionate about these issues. She can talk about it the whole day. And Dr. Kimani, I'll come back to you on the same issue. Thanks for those great thoughts. Talking about food and talking about food production, Sylvia Kuria, as a farmer, what is the place of smallholder farmers in our food system? Are we doing enough as a country at the moment to support the farmers? Sylvia.
Yeah, so I've been farming for like 10 years now. And let me just share that the role of the small-scale farmer is very important. You know, if it wasn't for a small-scale farmer today, none of us would have had our breakfast and our lunch and our dinner. Basically, because we know that when you look at statistics, 80% of food that is produced even in Africa is actually grown by small-scale farmers. And of that 80%, you'll find that 70% of those farmers are women, and only 25% of those farmers actually have access to information. So you find that farmers are very important, but because there's been no good policy, as like as we have been talking about, like we don't have very good policies, and the farmers don't have access to information. So you find that these small-scale farmers actually grow as the food, but everything has been so fragmented. You find like the government doesn't have a way in which they are supporting the farmers. So what has happened is now the middlemen have come to take over. You know, it's been crazy because, you know, like in my experience as farming, you know, when I started off, I was getting all the information that I needed from middlemen, from brokers. And these same middlemen are the ones who come to my farm and actually dictate the price of food, of how they're going to buy my things. You know, I'm the one who has grown, say, my broccoli or my potatoes or onions. And the middleman will come and say, no, Mama McKenna, we are going to buy these vegetables from you at this price. So the farmers are the most important, and yet they have no role. We've talked about how we have these big conferences that are coming up and farmers are never involved. You know, so we never even have a role. And when you think about the role of farmers, when you think about the SDGs, say, for example, you'll find that the farmers, like when you think about, you know, like all aspects of the SDGs, you know, from, you know, clean water to good health to access to food and everything, you find that the farmers are the ones who are actually helping to meet these goals. And yet they themselves, as we've been told by Dr. Kimani, are actually hungry, they are poor. And why? Because of the systems that have been going around. You find that, you know, like we've been taught to do monocropping. So you find a farmer even in Western Kenya, you know, which is my birthplace, you find that they have, you know, less than 1/8 of an acre and they have only grown maize, which doesn't make sense. These farmers don't even have kitchen gardens to actually feed themselves. And, you know, like the work that I've been doing, one of the things I always tell the farmers is that number one, you have to feed yourself first. So you must have a kitchen garden that grows all the food that you desire and all the food that you need the whole year round. And then from that garden, then you're able now to grow, you know, and see how you can be able to maybe sell the surplus. And that's how like we started our work as Sylvia's Basket. And one of the things that we do, like real quick as advocacy, is that we have sorry about that. So we've said that safe food is for everyone. So we're working towards making our food affordable. So if you come to Sylvia's Basket, you find that we have said that safe food is for everyone, organic food is for everybody, because everyone has a right to food, and not just food, but everyone has a right to safe food. And if you think about what the government has done really, like to like support small scale farmers, I'm sorry to say nothing much has been done. Let's just start with the budget allocation. It's still less than 4%. it's still less than 4%. And, we talk about the Maputo Declaration, nothing has been done about it. And maybe just to say something that I saw online, the Council of Governors in the counties have now said that they want to increase the budget allocation for farming to 10% in each of the counties that we have in Kenya. I don't know how that is going to run, but we are still trying to work towards it. And in Kiambu, we have a small group of us who are just trying to, bring together a policy on agroecology. We already have the draft, which is with the CEC, and we hope that that is going to, put a stamp, at least even in Kiambu, where I'm farming. Yeah, so I'm very happy, yes, like to share. It's been brief, but thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Thank you so much, Sylvia. Those are very, very important. But I'll come back to you to just further that conversation. Dr. Olu, listening to the conversation going on here, and as a policy analyst, what policy gaps in your view in Kenya in the quest to have a food system that is more sustainable, more resilient, more inclusive, and more
Thank you very much, David. Before I respond to your question, let me just mention that and thanks for the introduction. I coordinate what we call the Intersectoral Forum on Agrobiodiversity and Agroecology, ISFA. And I'm also a lecturer at the Department of Agricultural Economics, the University of Nairobi. So when I present, in addition to my policy analysis, you'll be able to understand from where I'm coming from. In terms of what are some of the policy gaps, there are many gaps, but I'll just focus on 4, which I think are key. One of them, I think, is that there is a very narrow and sort of disjointed understanding of what the food system is. From the definition of what food and nutrition security is, you quickly realize that, for you to address food security in a way that is resilient, inclusive, sustainable, you have to think of the food system from the environment, the eco aspect of it, the agricultural productivity aspect of it, the food aspect of it, and the human health aspect of it. So you can think of the food system as an eco-agri-food health system. But the problem is many of our policies, that want to address issues of food security look at it only from very narrowly in terms of increasing food productivity. But that is just a part of the issue. So I think this is one of the problems, that we have this very narrow understanding of what the food system is. And so we tend to focus on trying to improve or increase yields. And that's why we end up, applying these conventional agricultural practices, which uses a lot of inputs, fertilizers, and so on. And that also leads to very short-termism, short-term thinking of how to increase food production rather than long-term thinking of resilience and so on. The second gap that I see is that of lack of a truly farmer-centered, pro-poor and pro-vulnerable policies. So we have policies that, in the introduction, they tell us how farming is, the core, supports so many people, that small-scale farmers are the ones that produce the bulk of our foods. But when you look at the strategies that are then put in place to sort of address these issues, they are not geared towards supporting the small-scale farmers. Rather, so small-scale farmers know how to produce food sustainably, but sort of the economic and political rules that govern the food system are against them. And is often controlled by elites, political elites and policymakers, and also the what you'd call the private multinational companies. So the policies are then geared towards serving the interest of these elites rather than. Another thing that the third one that I would flag out is the poor implementation of the existing policies. Professor already mentioned that we are very good at producing and developing policies, which is true. But policies that are, very sexy on paper but not implemented will not bring about the change that we require. And when I talk about non-implementation or poor implementation, there are a few things that I want to highlight. One is that some of the implementation frameworks that are put in place are not practical. We do not look at, the social and economic and political and administrative environment in which they are supposed to be implemented. A second very important part of why there's this poor implementation is there's a lack of or very poorly designed incentive structures. You need to incentive to farmers, small-scale farmers, to practice some of these, practices and principles to produce food, so that it's able to reach the majority. So if these incentive structures are not well designed, then there will be poor implementation. And of course, I think there's just non-implementation of or enforcement of some of the existing guidelines.
Thanks, Dr.
Just ignoring. The last one, David, that I want to talk about is there's very little investment in agriculture. I think this is well known. Sylvia already talked about, the budget allocation is less than, I think the last budget was about only 1.8% dedicated to agriculture. So, when you combine all this, you realize that there's very little appreciation of agriculture, of the food system in the policy, domain. So the policymakers do not realize how significant or do not appreciate. So those are the 4 key policy gaps that I would like to flag.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thank you so much, Dr. for that highlight, and we'll come back to you on that conversation in a little bit. I'd like to talk to someone who represents all of us. All of us as human beings, we are actually consumers. Alice Kemunto, in your own view and as a practitioner in this area, what is the role of the consumer in our food system in terms of transformation that we seek? And what role does the consumer associations play towards this? Alice.
Thank you very much for the conveners and organizers of this forum. And indeed, as you have said, we are all consumers. And sometimes somehow it pains us when we are treated as us versus them. But we are all consumers, and we pay taxes, we work, we contribute towards the economic growth of our countries. So therefore, we also need a fair share of what is being produced in this country. So what is the role of consumers in our food systems? You can all agree with me that COVID-19 has exposed the gaps in food systems. And we've realized that there are more broken links in food systems. And what consumers are doing to ensure that they are safe, as it is enshrined in the Constitution of Article 43(1)(c), is that consumers of these days, or the present day consumers, are demanding for a more nutritious food that is also environment friendly. More nutritious food that is environment friendly. This is what consumers are looking for. Consumers are demanding by day to know where, how, when, and who produce the food in the market, the food that is on their table. They are demanding to know that. In essence, they are trying to know, to trace the food to the source, because everybody now is very cautious of their health. Everyone now wants to live a healthy life. So we want to know, where was this food produced? Who produced it? How was it produced? This is what consumers are asking now. Yes, it's the present day consumer in Kenya may not be that aware of the channels to demand for that. But actually the discussion has already started, and we are hoping for a more inclusive discussion going forward with other stakeholders on that. And what are consumers also doing? They want a transparency in food production. They want producers, manufacturers to label the food that they have produced, the ingredients they have used, so that we can have our freedom of choice. We can be able to choose the kind of food that we want to buy, not only pocket friendly, but food that is good for our health. Consumers also are looking forward to see laws that are friendly to them, laws that are going to be friendly to what they are consuming, laws that are going to help them. Even when their rights are infringed, they are able to go out there and demand for that to be changed. We are looking forward for that. So as consumer organization, ours is very simple, is to empower consumers to protect themselves. We want to ensure that we give them the information that they need. We link them with proper organizations. We link them with the relevant government authorities that are going to help them. You know, we cannot protect each and every one of the 47 million or plus people in Kenya. So what are we doing? We ensure that we empower them with information. We use several platforms, and also we partner with other stakeholders to ensure that consumers have information that they need in order to protect themselves. That is our core role. And I believe maybe I'll get some more time to
Thank you so much, Alice. We'll definitely get some more time. Thanks for that highlight. We all know and understand that nutrition is central to the issues we're speaking about today. I'd like to speak to someone who is a practitioner in this area. My brother, Edgar Okoth. Come to the screen. Edgar, how significant in your view is the nutrition subsector in transforming our food system? And what is the current status? How best do we move forward? As we are all aware, this is the final decade towards zero hunger that we are supposed to achieve by 2030. Edgar.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, David, for those really critical questions that we really need to address in terms of how then we move forward. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this rich panel conversation. So I'd like to start by just giving us some statistics in terms of where we are currently in terms of our nutrition indicators. So I'd like to mention that Kenya is one among very many countries globally that actually face the triple burden of malnutrition. So when I talk about the triple burden of malnutrition, what exactly do I mean? So this is looking at all these different types of malnutrition actually coexisting together. So we are talking about overnutrition in Kenya. So at a national level, and this is a national aggregate, we're having overnutrition of 4%. And the second level of kind of malnutrition that we have is the undernutrition. So undernutrition now, again, we've broken it down into 3. And we have wasting, that is at 4%. We have stunting, that is at 26%. And also we have underweight at 11%. And then the third level of malnutrition is micronutrient deficiency. And in some quarters, people will call it a hidden hunger. But it's good to actually note that these are just the national averages. We have regional disparities. That's if I talk about, for example, stunting, you'll go to a county where you find that it's at highest 45%. So that means that if at all you're actually walking around and then you see children under 5 years, you can actually say that one in the 2 children is actually stunted, and stunting is where it's too short for your age. And there are actually very negative impacts of a stunted child in later life in terms of their productive and also their cognitive development. So if I get time, I'll be able to expound in terms of the negative impacts of stunting. But again, why are we talking about nutrition in food systems? Yeah, nutrition is actually an indicator of how functional our food system is. So in a country, where you find very negative indicators of malnutrition or nutrition, then you can actually make an assumption that the food system is not actually functional well, because a functional food system needs to be able to deliver to the people so that we are able to consume nutritious, safe, and adequate food. So nutrition plays a very critical role as an indicator of a functional food system. But again, it's also very critical to note, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic, that malnutrition actually increases the vulnerability to infections. And it actually limits us in terms of maintaining our healthy status. So it's very imperative that we have access to healthy diet so that we are able to support a strong immune system. But it's also critical to note that by working on a more sustainable and resilient food systems, and when I talk about sustainable and more resilient food systems, I'm looking at in terms of looking at the value chain. So we look at in terms of production, we look at in terms of storage, we look at in terms of transportation, we look at value addition and also packaging, and also we look at safety of this food, but also in terms of the market system so that we are able to access adequate food whenever we actually need all these. Because these functional food systems will enable us to be able to have better diets for our improved health. So there are a number of things that we look at in terms of talking about nutrition and food systems. So how then do we make sure that this happens so that we are able to have a much more robust, a much more functional food systems? So we need to look at the impact of climate change in terms of the food systems. We need to look at how then do we incentivize the SMEs, the small and medium term, the medium enterprises, to be able to produce nutrient-rich food crops, because it is the SMEs that actually feed a lot of us. So we need to provide them with a lot of incentives to be able to produce nutrient-rich foods. We need to look at how then do we also foster the public-private partnership. How then do we foster the private-private partnership? How then do we foster the public-public partnership? Because all these things will be able to ensure that we address all the gaps that exist. But also in the interest of time, just allow me to say all these things. There are issues that also we need to look at, issues of inclusivity. We need to look at what is the role of women? What is the role of youth? What is the role of people living with disability in this value chain? Because they have a very critical role. There are a high percentage of this demographic that also needs that might also be left out. But the most important thing is in terms of the policy, because the policy, if you don't review the policy framework, it also lays a foundation in terms of how then do we interact. It also provides enabling environment that can support us in terms of including nutrition in the food systems. So I know we'll be able to engage much more further to maybe expound on some of these things. So thank you, and over to you.
Indeed, Edgar will be able to further that conversation. Thank you so much for great thoughts there. We all appreciate the role of evidence in all this that we are talking about. Edgar has alluded to statistics and facts, and we know evidence is really key in backing all this that we are talking about today. I'd like to speak to Professor Ruth Onyango, who is a renowned academician. Prof, what is, in your view, what is the role of research and academia in transforming our food system? What is the status currently, and what more should be done? Prof.
David, I don't know what to say here. You know, we have been doing all these things, right? Haven't we been doing all these things? We've been doing research, we've been publishing, we have nice sounding policies like Martin talked about. You know, we are all consumers. We talk of tracing where the food came from. We find the food, we buy it, you know, even when we know what we should be doing. Yeah, we have presented issues to our governments, you know, and they are not embarrassed. They are not ashamed to see emaciated, malnourished, hungry children on television. They don't see them in their communities because they don't walk around to see. You know, even Kenya, as you talk and we give these national statistics, people come to Nairobi and go away. You know, they don't go to the informal settlements. They think we are just up there. We are now middle income, by the way. Are you aware we are middle income? So we can't even get enough donor funding. I'm not going to tell you about research, evidence, yeah, policies we write. You know, we write English so well, David, that even our neighbors borrow our policies and implement them. Something is wrong in this country. And that's why I want to say, and I want to tell you young people, as you even go to groups, it can't be business as usual. COVID has shown us we are nothing. It doesn't matter whether you are a professor, you are a sweeper, you have degrees, you are rich, you have your money. Though COVID has shown us we are just as vulnerable as anyone else. We have seen who is dying. But you know what? I think God wants us to be more caring. What bothers me as I go out trying to do my work is that I don't have enough. I know what to do. I know what to do. I don't have enough resources to do more. The consumer group does not have enough money to actually get everyone involved and to say we need safe and better food, to get training to mama mbogas, you know, saying food handling is so critical. Food and water are the biggest carriers of diseases. We know that. We started to learn how to wash hands again because of Corona. I want to urge you all, we have the information, we have the know-how, we have the passion, but you know, we have to look at things differently. We cannot get out of Corona and go back to what people used to call normal. What is normal? What shall we have learned from this? We can't afford to go on as a Kenya that sees people who are going hungry, begging, like, you know, Professor Jill told us, begging. My mother always used to say, begging is, I don't want you to beg. Begging is so indignifying. When we give people food, we should not get them to a situation where they are beggars. It is bad. It's not good. It's a right. A right means affordable, accessible. You know, wherever it's coming from, whether we are providing. We have a government which doesn't have resources to have social protection on a continuous basis. You know, America has all the money, a lot of it. People are receiving checks in weekly checks, monthly checks in their boxes. We can't do that, David. Evidence, research, what? No. As you go, think differently. Go to those groups and talk of what can we do differently? How can we begin to turn this around so that we have more equity, we can feed our people, we involve the rights. You have to involve the people you are trying to help in what you're doing. We've seen it works. In our own small way, with my NGO we have had for 30 years, we have involved people in what we do. And I can tell you, we can count, we can tell you, we can take you to those farmers and they'll tell you, I have changed. With very little, you can change.
Thank you.
That's all I want to urge you, David.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. Prof has really put it well, that now it's time for action. It's time to move beyond the paperwork and get to work and get to impact and have change. Dear panelists, I want to, and I know we are pressed for time, I want to just come around once again, but very quickly get your thoughts on the way forward. I'd ask you to just stick to 1 minute for this round. I'd begin with you, Professor Jill Guy. Listening to all these conversations, and it's clear there's need for a good way forward. And moving forward, in your view, how do we ensure accountability for the right to adequate food in Kenya? Prof.
Okay, as I said, I'm a lawyer, so let me stick to the law. That's what I know something about. I think we could do more with the provisions in the Constitution. I think we could make bigger claims on the courts. We have seen it in other areas. Let me take one example of a case you might have heard of. It was called the 160 Girls case. And it was about girls who had been sexually assaulted, and the authorities, the police and so on, had done nothing about it, hadn't investigated. And the case went to the High Court, and Justice, I think it was Justice Mumbi Ngugi, who's a real heroine of the rights under the Constitution. They actually held people responsible for not having done what they should have done in terms of investigation and so on. And this is what we need. We need to focus. We do need the evidence, Professor Ruth. The government knows about it, the courts don't. If we go to court, we need to have all the evidence very clearly to convince the court that, that things that should have been done have not been done. And that then we need to get orders from the courts to say, deal with this issue, come back to us, tell us what you've been doing. We need orders that will hold people actually responsible. It's not just a question of orders and legal accountability. We need to work with society so that there is support for the cases, so that the cases give more publicity, so that they become something that people feel is a contribution. It's only a contribution to realizing the right to food. But I think it can be more useful than it has been in the past. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Jill. Thank you so much, and thanks for keeping it within the time. Dr. Kimani, I would like to speak to you on this, and we are going to keep it in 1 minute. I know it's very difficult with the passion that is inside us, but picking up from where Professor Jill has left it, how do we progress towards universal food access from here, Dr. Kimani?
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe I first introduce what universal food access is, because it may be something that we should know, because food should be universally accessed, being a human right, but it's not. And as part of the UN Summit Action 5 solutions, one of the things that, okay, I'm a part of the core leadership of the UN Action Track, UN Summit, Food System Summit Action 5.2 area, which is on universal food access. And what we want to do in this, we want to actually ensure that recommend that universal food access is actually recognized as a policy, like inspired by the universal health coverage, education for all, universal access to education. We want that food is included in a vital needs compact with education and health, and supported by the WHO, the UNESCO, and other UN agencies that are related to food, so that at the UN summit, we want to see food, universal access to food supported and recognized. And we would want to see eventually that food is enacted in states as as a common good, as a public good, and as a right to food. We know that at the moment we have the right to food in many constitutions, but we want to really have this tricentric reconceptualization of food, so that food is not just a commodity. We want to see it understood as a common good, public good, and a right to food. I know, David, you have not given me enough time to explain all that, but maybe today is that day for introducing this concept. With time, we will be able to explain. And how, so we would want to have a tricentric food governance, where we have a policy mix, where we have the market provision based on demand and supply, what is now commonly the thing that is happening now. But on top of that, we want to have the public provision, where we have the government taking responsibility of providing food. Nobody should have to go to bed hungry, and the government should have a responsibility to ensure that everyone has access to food. We also want to support civic collective mechanisms through the community, that people can have food within the community. They are supported to be able to produce food locally, local food production for local use, and also sharing. And some of the actions we would want to have, as I said, local food production for local consumption, supporting communities to be able to have these collective actions, collective mechanisms, and supporting these smallholder farmers. We want to scale up the national and local food procurement mechanisms from smallholder farmers, or those smallholder producers of food. And also we want to scale up the legal protection of the right to food. So we have some countries have constitutionalized this, the right to food, but not all. We would want to promote that. In this decade of action towards 2030, we want to ensure that we really promote the right to food, and it's constitutionalized. And we also have framework laws in these countries to protect the right to food. We also want to promote universal school feeding programs. At the moment, they are just erratic, just small places where we have food, school feeding, but that could also promote this universal food access. And then social protection mechanisms like food banks and food reserves to really protect the vulnerable people. And finally, but this is not all, I'm just mentioning one key thing, that we would want to introduce food rescue systems where food is collected from where it is in excess. A lot of food is being wasted in the markets, in farms, and thrown to the landfills where it really causes carbon emissions. We would want to put systems in place where that kind of food is collected and redistributed so that we have equity and food justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Liz. The passion is absolute and clear in Dr. Liz's voice and in the expression. Colleagues, this conversation cannot end here. It's going to go deep within the breakout sessions. And you can also keep this conversation with Dr. Liz on her Twitter. She's very active on Twitter discussing these issues at Liz_Kimani. Let the conversation continue. I'd like to speak to Sylvia. Sylvia, in just 1 minute, I hope you'll be able to keep it within that frame. What commitment can we expect from farmers towards transforming our food system? Sylvia.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to keep it to 1 minute. It's difficult, but I'm going to try my best. So when you talk about transforming the food system, it means that we have to change. So why are we changing? We're changing because it's not working. So what I would like to say as farmers is that we have to be honest with ourselves to say that how we've been farming for the past 30, 40, 50 years is just not working. It's not sustainable. So we as farmers have to sit back and be honest and accept that we have to change the way we do our farming, and we have to move towards agroecology. We have to move towards more sustainable ways of farming, because what has been happening in the past is just not working. And secondly, I just want farmers to be honest. You know, you'll find many farmers have got 2 plots. You know me, I'm very big on food safety. They have 2 plots. They have the small garden where they don't spray any chemicals, and then they have the one for the shop where they spray everything going to the market. Farmers have to be honest, and they have to know that we have to grow safe food for everybody. The food that you grow at home should be of the same quality as the one that you take to the shops. And then something else, the final one, which I'm going to try and say real quick, farmers have to stop being spectators. You know, like for me, many times, you know, I knock on government offices, I knock on different places, you know, like civil societies, and I tell them what I feel, I tell them how we can be able to work together. But I find the farmers who are the most important people, who are the small-scale farmers we have said are feeding us, are spectators. We just sit back and we are waiting for things to happen. We're waiting for people in conferences to make the choices for us, and that has to stop. We have to stop spectating, and we have to take part in policies, even at the local and ground level. You know, like for me, my MCA knows me. I'm working with the people on the ground. And once we stop being spectators and being honest and changing the systems, I think there'll be some good positive change in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Farmers, let us stop being spectators. Really, all of us should take this message home. Thanks so much, Sylvia. I'd like to speak to you, Dr. Ulu. In 1 minute, how do we ensure an enabling policy environment as we move towards a more sustainable, inclusive, resilient, and equitable food system in Kenya? Dr. Ulu.
Thank you very much, David. I think to have that enabling environment, and given the nature of attaining food security, there are so many produce some guidelines on the right to food, and there are almost 19 or so guidelines on areas that need to be focused on in terms of the enabling environment. Things like democracy, market systems, food safety, access to resources like land and so on, equity, involvement of women and so on. But I just want to focus on one thing that I think is key, and that is, being able to have genuine and deliberate participation of the public. We need to back control of our food system, how the decisions are made, how policies are, made. Individuals, communities, and farmers need to take back control of how the food system is managed and controlled. So to me, that is a very key thing in among the issues that we need to put in place to ensure that we have the enabling environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ulu. Thank you so much. It's good speaking to you. Alice Kemunto, I'd like to have this conversation with you in 1 minute, and I'd like to know what is the commitment of the consumer associations and consumers in general towards accountability for the right to adequate food in Kenya. Alice?
Thank you once more. I would like, before I get into the commitment, I would like all of us to know that Mother Earth has everything for us, and whatever that is being produced on Earth can satisfy each and every organism as inclusive. So consumers, first of all, have to love themselves. We have to love ourselves. By loving ourselves, we'll do the right thing. So what is our commitment? Our commitment as consumer association is to keep on doing consumer awareness, and we want to base ourselves in, we want to lean more into evidence-based advocacy. We want to carry on that advocacy. Yes, we don't have that resources that we may need, but together with other stakeholders, we believe that we can able to achieve this. And also would like, as consumer organizations to push for a more friendly legislations that will be friendly to consumers. And would also want to have food systems. We'll push for food systems that will conserve our environment. Our Mother Earth would really not forgive us, as Wangari Maathai said, that nature cannot forgive you if you do something wrong to it. So we want to see into those systems that will conserve our nature for our future generations, because when we live, there are consumers who are going to leave behind. Finally, we will not forget to roll out our sleeves, ensure that we go out there. We work with the consumers at the grassroots. Be real, be ourselves, don't pretend. And this is what I usually tell people. Can we stop the boardroom meetings? And they feel that I'm so harsh on them. Stop the boardroom meetings. Let's go at the grassroots. Let's meet the people, talk to people, and talk to government. Don't run away when there's a policy that is being made at your county. Please go for public participation. Make a decision for what is affecting you as a consumer, because as we say in security, that security begins with you and me. But even in food production and consumption, a healthy begins with you and me. So you have control control of your health. You have control of the laws of the country. You have control of what's happening around you. So we will not relent on that. We'll go out of our way to ensure that consumers are protected. And finally, we are all consumers. So please just come on board and join us, and we will make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alice. Thank you so much for the passion. Alice has actually commissioned us to go out there, as we were commissioned in the biblical days, to go out there and just engage the consumers and have impact. Talking about going out there and engaging consumers, Edgar, how do we then enhance system thinking in the entire spectrum of nutrition sensitive and nutrition specific interventions as we head towards transforming our food system? Edgar, in 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. So I just want to follow through the thought process of Professor Ruth, in terms of how then do we make this happen? I want to talk about two things. One is we need to address the rural multidimensional poverty as a critical part of new thinking into the food systems. And this will transform how we make this happen. So then what is now the process of doing this? One is we need to encourage the government and various stakeholders so that we are able to tackle the layers of disadvantages or the layers of poverty in the rural setup. And in some quarters and some donors actually call it the intersectionality. Because once we address these layers or varying layers of disadvantages at the rural or the the intersectionality that is actually facing the rural and the urban poor. And this is just looking at these particular populations. And we need to include in terms of some of the chronic poverty and hunger that actually they face, in terms of even lack of critical access to health, in terms of lack of infrastructure, lack of communication, in terms of connectivity. This will actually be able to enhance all these. Currently, the government and also some other stakeholders are trying to build in the modern markets. How then do we make these modern markets be able to capacitate our women so that we can encourage inclusive childcare practices? For example, having a nutrition or a lactation room, so that as they go on in terms of their trade, they're also being able to take care of their kids. So it's looking at the entire food systems to be able to do this. I can also be able to discuss this at a later date. The second thing that I actually need to talk about is in terms of how then do we transform and address food losses and waste. Yeah, so these are very critical things. More than 45% of the food that we produce along the value chain is actually lost. So how then do we ensure that we come up and very realistically, I know we have guidelines, but then realistic implementation of these guidelines so that we are able to avoid these food losses, and also in terms of ensuring that we channel this food to the right place. The last thing that I also want to talk about is in terms of innovation. Yeah? We are known as a country to be innovators in terms of telecommunication, in terms of our social innovation. So then we need to drive in innovation into the food systems, because then this will enhance the systemic thinking, because it's not about what is there and what is not there. It's about how then do we reboot the system? How then do we ensure that we have participation of the youth? The youth will participate when there is actually a lot of innovation that actually got into this. So innovation is very critical in terms of ensuring that all this, so things to do with fortification in terms of addressing all this, innovation in terms of addressing the consumer needs, innovation in terms of addressing the consumer expectation, innovation in terms of ensuring that we have equal participation of both the consumers, the producers, and also the aggregators, because then when we bring all these things into one system, then we are able to address all these systemic issues, and also we are able to transform the food system so that we can actually achieve the game-changing solutions that actually we are looking at. So for me, I think those are three critical things that we can actually address so that we can actually be able to bring in terms of enhancing the whole systemic thinking towards inclusion of both nutrition specific, but also nutrition sensitive. Thank you, and over to you, David.
Thank you so much, Edgar. That was quite informative. As I come to the conclusion of this panel, and Prof. Ruth, I want to come back to you again, and in just 1 minute, in view of all this conversation that we are having, and in light of what you had discussed earlier, how do we improve the nexus between evidence, the policy, and to a larger extent legislation, and the action towards the realization of the right to adequate food? In 1 minute, Prof.
Thank you, David. Everybody has a role to play. Everybody has a role to play. But the way what we're doing in Vihiga, and I want to welcome everyone when the COVID environment allows. I haven't even been there, but what the people are doing on the ground, Stella Kimani at WHH and her team, and Jerry and our team, it's just amazing. And the government, when you bring it to their table, when you discuss how you can work together, when you let them know that this is already in the Constitution and what are they doing, really getting to work together, you begin to see results. And so I think Vihiga will be the first county of the 47 to show how we can actualize this right to food. But the evidence, I don't just run an organization because I'm an NGO, philanthropic, and I want to be nice. Yeah, yes, I want to be nice and to address these issues, but you have to carry the evidence with you. And matters of food, for example, you have to carry the evidence. And that's where researchers come in. And that's how we repackage it. And even in making policies, you need the evidence, and maybe we don't do that enough for it to be sustainable. So it's absolutely critical. Even as we publish, we have to get the information packaged in a manner that can be applied on the ground and by consumers, by farmers, in pictures, use communications experts. That's why I say everyone here actually is required. The evidence is absolutely critical. But you also find information in the communities. It's not like we know everything, We also learn as we go to the ground. I just feel from the time I went to the ground, I became richer in my knowledge because I was also learning from what was going on. So it's a give and take, Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Onyango. Ladies and gentlemen, this discussion panel is just round one of what is happening today. And as you can see, the issues are still hot and the issues are vast. So we've not conclusively discussed them. We've just highlighted and set pace. At this juncture now, we'd like to go deep into exploration and discussion of these issues. We are now going to head